French and Friends, 1590 WCGO. We are at it once again, talking with the mayoral candidates here in Evanston, and we welcome Brian Miller. Mr. Miller, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I should say Alderman Miller. Buddy, you keep really busy. I asked you if you were still working for Cook County Commissioner Larry Suffredin, and indeed you are while doing your duties as an alderman.
Correct.
What's the most fulfilling thing you find serving in government? You've done it for quite a while now.
Yeah, it's the ability to actually impact people's lives on a large scale. So with Commissioner Suffredin this last fall, we just passed an increase in the minimum wage for suburban Cook County. So this is getting millions of people a raise.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than that.
That's a theme that we've been harping on here for a while. And without getting into the national politics, I think one of the reasons that some of these messages resonated was people are truly hurting. And there has become this terrible disconnect between congresspeople and representatives who are doing quite well. And I think have kind of, they're too far afield with understanding what regular people are going through. Right. $50, $100, $200 a month is, it might as well be a couple $1,000s for some people. You got to keep your head above water. So how can we do that in Evanston? What are some of the things you can do as mayor of Evanston to help the locals?
Well, we're having a conversation in this race, a lot of talk about how to do jobs. And it's not just having good job or a job in general, it's a good job. So for example, what we've been talking about doing my campaign is let's do a regional assessment of the needs of our employers. Yeah. So we have 2 hospitals in town. I'm sure there's a need for nurses. I'm sure there's a need for medical technicians. Yeah. Those are great long-term jobs.
They are.
Let's take our individuals that are currently in need of jobs. Let's work with employers to have a slot for them. We'll get them trained, teach. Actually, the city can work to help them become a nurse. Right. At the same time, we also have the assistance that these people need to actually go through the education. So get them rental help, get them help with childcare, get them help with transportation. So we can get them a long-term career, not just working at, retail or fast food or something of that sort.
You grew up in Evanston, and you have experience, obviously, as an alderman in Evanston, while also seeing the big city, our neighbor Chicago here. Right. What are some of the things that you can draw, having worked in Chicago with its, it's so much bigger than Evanston, but what are some of the things you can take there that are successful and apply to Evanston?
So do you know about a ceasefire? Project
yes,
Cure.
Of course. What was my guy's name? T.O. Hardiman? Was that one of my
T.O. Correct.
I know T. I haven't seen him in years, but
yeah. So I think the best thing we can do, we have a problem with violence in Evanston. It's not the same size as Chicago, a problem, but we're still having, even 2-3 nights ago, we had an individual shot in Evanston. Yeah. We actually have outreach workers on staff that are like ceasefire workers. These are usually ex-offenders that go into the communities and people at risk of committing violence. They'll build relationships with them and then connect them to services. Yeah. So as Alderman, I twice called it double the number of outreach workers. Let's get these kids, these at-risk kids that are going down this path. Let's intervene, get them the services they need. Absolutely. Couple that with mental health counseling as well. So that's been very successful on the south side of Chicago. We should be doing more of that here.
Now is the time to do it. If we don't address it now, we'd hate to see what happens. All this ties to money. It's Bill Clinton. It's the economy stupid. And, Bob Marley ripped the lyric from the Bible. A hungry man is an angry man. And when you have people that are desperate times will often lead even good people to desperate measures. So I'm encouraged about that. Okay, now what are some of the things, obviously Evanston being smaller, probably to a degree, in a way, more wealthier than Chicago at large. I don't know if that's true. It's just my impression. But what about that? It's smaller. What is more unique about governing in Evanston than Chicago per se?
Well, I think it's, growing up here, we have the progressive tradition. And it really is. We're a very active, engaged community, and at the same time we stand up for our beliefs, and that's the amazing thing. We have, like you said, we are a wealthy community, but it's not just in terms of money, it's a wealth of resources. Northwestern University has how many national centers and expertise, and you name it. We have literally national thought leaders living in our community that are involved in these things. So it's one thing to just be, to have the ability to address these problems, but we really do have the will as Evanstonians to solve these problems. So I think if it can be done anywhere, it can be done here, and we can actually set the model for a national policies, programs, agenda in solving some of these progressive issues.
Let's talk about the current mayor, and this is a question I've asked a couple of your competitors. What are some of the things that you would like to see continue that the current mayor has done well, that you would that would exist and continue in a Brian Miller how can I forget the word? Brian Miller mayoral shit. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we've been really good on environmental issues. Yeah. In terms of that, there's, of course, we can always do more, and we can, like I said, set the national standard for environmental. So there's a great something called, special assessments.
Yes, sir.
For if you want your alley repaved, your sidewalk repaired. There's actually opportunities to do that through like green infrastructure. We could actually, as part of your tax bill, we set the block up. Whoever wants to do it on the block, they can get solar panels or weatherization, et cetera. We could really lead the way in terms of environmental issues in the whole country, like we've been doing so far.
What are some things that have maybe been neglected that you would like to kickstart as mayor?
So, I've started working on police accountability. Has been a big issue of mine.
Yeah.
And I think we need to have an honest conversation about what's going on in our community with the police and how they're treating certain members of our community as well. So we've started doing that as recently as the last couple of weeks.
Wow.
So it's a conversation we need to continue over the next couple years.
It's easy for those of us who aren't governing, who aren't policing, to sit back and say, well, where's Officer Friendly? When I was a kid, we used to know who our officer was on the beat, and that's easy for me to say, and it's also easy for us to suggest to police, but I know it's a lot tamer here in Evanston, but for instance, July 4th, well, maybe it was July or Labor Day or something, I saw a police car, by the beach, the Chicago police, obviously, bullet hole in the tail of the vehicle. Right. So it's really a catch-22, and we're in a bizarre situation where we need that trust between the community, but we also need a little love going both ways. How can we address this?
Well, and you bring up a good point. Being a police officer is a tough job. There are risks to being a police officer, but we got to recognize that in our community, this isn't the South Side of Chicago.
Of course.
And we need to protect our officers, but we also need to make sure that our residents are being treated appropriately as residents. So I think there needs to be a culture shift within our police department. Part of that is going to be having an independent review process for police complaints so that the public believes that their complaints are being heard. Right now, what happens is the police officers review it. They look at the evidence. They say, okay, this is consistent with policy. We've never had any complaints found it. So I think we're finally starting to shift within our police office department to actually recognize that there needs to be a change.
Brian Miller is our guest, 9th Ward Alderman. Brian for Evanston.com. Let's go through some of the other things that you're interested in doing. Upgrading the parks and recreation facilities. We're in pretty good shape here in Evanston. A lot of things to do, a lot of places to go, but how can we improve?
Well, we actually just did a study of all of our parks. So this is Evanston's parks, our schools, the Ridgeville Park District, the Lakefront Park District. And our average grade was a C+.
Wow.
So
I would have thought it had been better, but
right. We have a lot of parks, which is an amazing thing. And the lakefront is a jewel of our community. But we need to have a long-term plan to actually make sure that we're maintaining them. So, for example, James Park is our busiest park. Yeah. And if it rains, you can't use the fields for 2 or 3 days because the drainage system isn't there. We got to put the resources into to our parks to maintain them at the level that they need to be at.
Yeah, I had no idea, but that is a total bummer when you can't play. The kids, especially like baseball season. And I will say, since I work at Evanston, baseball, I live in the north side of Chicago, but I work in Evanston. So when the weather's nice, I ride my bike, and my son and I stop by James Park watching the games. Right. You need to help me get a little intra-league between Chicago and Evanston. That would be fun, wouldn't it? Yeah. Okay, we've already talked a little bit about violence and policing, improving transparency and accountability. This is one I've heard a lot of people talking about. So what are some of the things that the public does not have access to the information, knowing what's going on, that we could improve?
I think that before we make any big decision as a community, the public needs to be considered first and be heard first. Yeah. A lot of times what's happening is the public feels like these decisions are being made behind closed doors, et cetera. So for example, anytime there's a decision to put a development in downtown Evanston, the developer will come in and present a proposal, and then the public comes out, and usually they're upset about the extent of the proposal. Right. So we need to make sure that we're having the conversation up front. So one, it's good for the public that they don't feel blindsided, but then two, it's good for developers in a sense so they don't feel blindsided as well. We just need to be more upfront and transparent about what we're doing in most of our activities.
How can we as citizens, since you've been in government a long time, and I imagine, and without not trying to put you in an awkward position, but the public will ex post facto will start to complain instead of being there for when they have the opportunity. How can we encourage people to be more involved? And maybe that has to do with transparency. They know when these meetings are, and they're easy to get to. They're not held at 2:30 in the afternoon, for instance, when everyone's working. Is that part of it?
Well, I think it's also, this is the wonk in me, the policy wonk. Yeah. I think our process isn't conducive to public input. A lot of times we have a bottom up process where the ideas come from, in Evanston, we have 50 boards and commissions. Wow. So it's hard to actually keep track of what everyone's doing. Myself that is involved in this all the time, it's hard for me to keep track, let alone the public. And then all of a sudden something comes to the city council and it's passed in 2 weeks and the public's like, I had no idea this was going on. So I think if we start at the public or at the city council with the public and give notice to the public that this is happening, and then we can refer somewhere else for discussions, I think the public will have more information or more notice of what's going on and more opportunity to give information.
I hope so. Brian Miller, 9th Ward Alderman, running for mayor, Brian for Evanston.com. Okay, city services. Where are we lacking? What improvement could we make to the city services that you hear a lot? Because obviously as an alderman, you hear a lot of these things.
Right. So I mean, city services is, there's a number of things we need to devote more resources to. Rodent control. We actually have a big rodent problem in Evanston in terms of it's not just putting out traps and bait in a sense. We really have to focus on removing the food sources and the life-sustaining aspects of rodents. We have to trash pickup's a big deal in the sense that's part of the reason with rodent control as well is that we're not actually picking it up well or picking up cleanly, leaving things behind, et cetera, in that sense. Street sweeping's a good issue in the city. We need to do more of it. Leaves are in the streets. I mean, the basic quality of life issues that affect residents' lives, we actually need to do a better job of.
I know some of your opponents have certainly been talking about parking. You know, a lot of people are not happy with the situation here. Any way to get some relief to the people? I mean, obviously that's a good source of revenue for the city too. Right. So, you know, what do we do?
I think it's hard too. So, for example, in my ward, I have 3 train stations. So the 2 Main Street stations and the one in South Boulevard. Obviously, there's going to be a need for people to come park around there. Yeah. The problem we have though is that we protect certain blocks and not others. So why is it that the 2000 block of Main Street versus, and that's just making that up, versus, Seward Avenue. Why is it that one street is protected versus the other? Because all you're going to do is push that demand from those people parking in other places. Yeah. We really need a comprehensive look at how we're treating our residents in terms of parking and make sure it's equitable for them all. I'm
going to say something you rarely hear from anybody on the radio or in media, but I've piled on politicians plenty of times, but to me, it's really so thankless because you have to do a good job to get reelected. You have to cater to people, but you have to get things done that sometimes are painful to do. So I don't know. I can't imagine going after it. But I
appreciate you saying that, but the hard part too is that you put yourself out there,
right?
And there's always going to be someone unhappy, and there's also going to be other politicians that are unhappy too. So it often kind of gets a keeping your head in the sand type mentality from politicians because no matter what, you get it your head shot off in a sense metaphorically if you actually say anything. So it's tough for the job just even to try to get anything done.
Well, Brian, we wish you all the best. May the best man win. Of course, Brian Miller, 9th Ward Alderman, Evanston Mayoral candidate. Brian for Evanston.com. Anything else you want to say to sign off? If I'm a voter, I'm ready to go. I just need to hear the one thing, that stereotypical plea for your vote. What is it?
Well, as an alderman, I've been the independent voice on the council. We have these hard conversations, these long-standing conversations in the community that we haven't been able to address. Yes, I've been the one actually pushing forward to say, let's do something about it. So I believe we're a progressive community. I've been in the mold of that progressiveness. I've been the independent voice to say, let's finally do something. And I think we can do that in Evanston. And with your support and your vote, the citizens will be able to move forward in these issues.
It really is a great city.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful place. Anytime you can have a wonderful university and all the resources, like you said, it's truly a jewel. Brian Miller, thank you again. Brian for Evanston.com. And again, good luck, sir.
Thank you.
French and Friends, more coming up.